And, most importantly, I've saved the largest article or news story for last for this episode. Around mid-April of 2020, Amtrak Helidot, otherwise known as Siemens Viaggio or Siemens Ventura coaches, have been spotted testing along the Northeast Corridor. And now, on to the #1 top story of the May 2020 Pensyfan Periodical. Brightline to start commuter service between Miami and Ventura, Florida. And now, after much consideration for this title, the top story of the June 2020 Pensyfan Periodical is Amtrak to reduce long-distance trains to tri-weekly service starting October 1st. Now, the top story for the Pensyfan Periodical is a bit of a three-way tie, but all to do with a common theme. With this in mind, I have 3 words to describe all 3 of these stories. And those 3 words are 3 different commuter railroads all facing possible service reductions and project cancellations. Yikes. And now, the top story of the August 2020 Pensyfan Periodical is Amtrak releases a final design for the ALC-42 Siemens Chargers. And now, the top story of the September 2020 Pensyfan Periodical is Great Britain officially ends rail franchising. And now, the top story of the October 2020 Pensyfan Periodical is Canadian National releases heritage units. And now, the top story of the November 2020 Pensyfan Periodical is Rocky Mountaineer to introduce Denver to Moab service. And now, after much consideration for the title, the top story of the December 2020 Pensyfan Periodical is MTA purchases dual-mode Siemens Chargers. And now, the top story for the first Pensyfan Periodical of 2021 is Metra orders bi-level Alstom Coradia cab cars and coaches. And now, the top story of the February 2021 Pensyfan Periodical is Amtrak to start Gulf Coast service in 2022. And now, the top story of the March 2021 Pensyfan Periodical is Canadian Pacific acquires Kansas City Southern. With such a major acquisition, surely nothing could stop the story. What now? Amtrak unveiled a new map suggesting new corridors? Well, let me see. Oh. Well then. It looks like we have 2 top stories for this periodical. Talk about an unexpected 1-year anniversary treat. And now, the top story of the April 2021 Pensyfan Periodical is Long Island Railroad to test battery EMUs. And now, the top story of the May 2021 Pensyfan Periodical is CSX releases F40PH heritage unit. And now, the top story of the June 2021 Pensyfan Periodical is Amtrak to refurbish superliners. And now, after much consideration, the top story of the July 2021 Pensyfan Periodical is Elliston is to start construction for Prairie Link. And now, the top story of the August 2021 Pensyfan Periodical is CMU has, wait a minute, am I seeing that right? Is that a British Rail Class 230? And now, the top story of the September 2021 Pensyfan Periodical is Salt Lake City proposes a restoration of the Rio Grande Station. And now, the top story of the October 2021 Pensyfan Periodical is FRA releases Midwest Rail Plan. And now, the top story of the November 2021 Pensyfan Periodical is Canadian Pacific releases Hapag-Lloyd Tribute Unit. And now, the top story of the December 2021 Pensyfan Periodical is Amtrak 662 receives a heritage wrap. Now, considering that 2021 is the first full year of the channel, I have decided to introduce a new annual section of the periodical called the Top Story of the Year, in which one of the 12 top stories will be highlighted as the most important of the year. With that said, the 2021 Top Story of the Year is Canadian Pacific acquires Kansas City Southern. And now, the top story of the January 2022 Pensyfan Periodical is BNSF to acquire Montana Rail Link. And now, the top story of the February 2022 Pensyfan Periodical is South Shore Line to end street running. And now, the top story of the March 2022 Pensyfan Periodical is VR Group acquires Herivia Sweden. And now, after a very tough decision for the title, the top story of the April 2022 Pensyfan Periodical is Go Transit selects ON Express to electrify the commuter rail network. And now, the top story of the May 2022 Pensyfan Periodical is Crossrail's Elizabeth Line finally opened. And now, the top story of the June 2022 Pensyfan Periodical is Texas Central loses their executive board and gains eminent domain. And now, the top story of the July 2022 Pensyfan Periodical is Union Pacific unveils new livery. And now, the top story of the August 2022 Pensyfan Periodical is a private company considers Kenosha to Milwaukee commuter service. And now, the top story of the September 2022 Pensyfan Periodical is Strike averted, but delayed to October. And now, the top story of the October 2022 Pensyfan Periodical is
the mandated
Metromax officially revealed. But that's not why I decided to focus on hydrogen as a top story. In addition to the unusually large number of hydrogen-related articles, one more locomotive manufacturer revealed plans to not only develop a hydrogen-powered prime mover, but also a brand new class of hydrogen-powered locomotives, with a design unlike anything in all of railroading history. It's time for the moment you've been waiting for. Okay, I'm not doing the SpongeBob reference because my voice hurts. But anyways, introducing the WebTech... What? And now, the top story of the December 2022 Pensyfan Periodical is Ontario Northland purchases Siemens chargers. Now that this channel has existed for more than 2 years, I'd like to continue the annual tradition of including a top story of the year for the last periodical of that year, in which one of the top stories is further analyzed and reflected upon. For 2022, the top story of the year goes to Strike averted. And now, the top story of the January 2023 Pensyfan Periodical is Genesee and Wyoming versus the EPA. And now, the top story of the February 2023 Pensyfan Periodical is Hotbox causes hazmat derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. And now, the top story of the March 2023 Pensyfan Periodical is Andy Byford to join Amtrak. And now, the top story of the April 2023 Pensyfan Periodical is California passes emission standards for locomotives. And now, the top story of the May 2023 Pensyfan Periodical is CSX releases first of many heritage units. And now, the top story of the June 2023 Pensyfan Periodical is CPKC chooses an official livery. And now, the top story of the July 2023 Pensyfan Periodical is Britain to close over 1,000 ticket offices.